Are you here because you just crave a good night's sleep? Wouldn't you just love to click play and immediately hear a voice narrating a sleep story podcast so soft and calming that it almost hypnotizes you into a deep sleep as soon as it begins? Sleepy Tales of Lore understands. We feature yarns of myths and legends passed down through the ages in a soothing, hypnotic voice that will put you into a deep sleep quickly so you awake feeling refreshed. Craving sleep is the reason we are here. And if you don't care at all about watching a video, even if it has beautiful images, and you would just rather get into bed, closing your eyes, and falling into a deep sleep within minutes by listening to our podcasts that go on for hours, you've come to the right place. My name is Declan, and I narrate Sleepy Tales of Lore podcasts for seniors and all who crave falling into a deep sleep quickly. If you want more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now before getting into bed. And you'll get a new Sleepy Tales of Lore story as soon as it posts, so you won't miss a single one. So, hit the pause button now if my voice is already making you sleepy. Then, hit that subscribe button to guarantee your spot. Return as soon as you're in your night clothes and ready to get into bed for the most restful sleep you've had in ages. Then fall asleep into total relaxation as tonight's story begins. Tonight's story is the first in our newest playlist collection called Dreams, where every story will be about the dreams our dreamer experiences in the story that night. And we start with a simple one called Happy Dreams of Childhood, where our dreamer experiences childhood around the world. Now get into your most comfortable position in bed to drift off soon into a deep sleep. Chapter 1, Into the Garden of Dreams. Now there was once a woman who walked barefoot along a moonlit path. The night was warm and still, the kind of stillness that settles over the world only when it has decided at last to rest. On either side of her, great flowering bushes pressed close, their blooms of pink and gold and deep coral glowing softly, as though they held the last warmth of the day inside their petals. She did not know quite where she was going. She only knew that the path was smooth beneath her feet, and the moon above her was full and round and close, so close she might have reached up and pressed her palm to it like a child pressing a hand to a lit lantern. The air smelled of something sweet and old, of honeysuckle and warm grass and the particular softness of summer evenings in a place half remembered. It smelled, in fact, of childhood, of long days that stretched and stretched, of laughter carried on the wind, of stories begun at dusk and not yet finished. And so she walked. And as she walked, the path began to glow before her, and the world began very gently to change. Our dreamer steps into the first tale, a golden story from the heart of Old Ireland, where a little boy discovers a secret that only children are meant to know. Chapter 2, The Boy Who Found the Fairy Road, Ireland. Now there was once, in the west of Ireland, a boy called Fionn, not a great warrior Fionn, but a small, ordinary, wonderfully curious one, who lived with his grandmother near the edge of a bog. The bog in summer was a magnificent thing. It shimmered with water that caught the light like broken mirrors, and the heather ran purple as far as the eye could dream. One midsummer morning, Fionn woke before the sun and crept barefoot out of the cottage. The grass was cold and silver with dew, and there at the edge of the bog he saw something he had never seen before, a narrow path of flat white stones laid perfectly one by one, leading away into the heather. His grandmother had told him about such things. The fairy roads, she called them. You must never block them, and you must never build upon them, but if you are lucky enough to find one, well, you may follow it. Just follow it slowly. Just breathe and follow. And so little Fionn did. He stepped one careful foot at a time along the white stones, and the bog parted around him like a gentle sea, and the heather hummed low and sweet, and somewhere ahead he began to hear the finest music. There, in a hollow he had walked past 100 times without seeing, were the smallest dancers he had ever seen, no taller than a foxglove bloom, spinning in circles as fast as dragonfly wings, laughing so freely it sounded like rain on a still lake. Fionn sat down on a nearby stone. He did not speak. He only watched and smiled, and by one of the small dancers caught his eye and winked at him as though this was the most natural thing in the world. He walked home when the sun had fully risen, his feet still cold with dew, his heart so full he could not have spoken of what he saw even if he had tried. He kept it quietly, the way you keep the very best things, tucked warm inside, just for yourself. The dreamer drifts further along the moonlit path, and the scent of cherry blossom drifts toward her, carrying a tale from the hills of Japan, where a young girl receives an unexpected and most beautiful gift. Chapter 3. The Girl Who Caught a Petal, Japan. Now there was once in the mountains of Japan a girl called Hana, which means flower, who had a very particular gift. She could tell from the way a cherry blossom petal fell exactly what kind of day it would be. If it fell fast and straight, the day would be bright and busy. If it spiraled slowly, the day would be gentle and long. And if it hovered, if it lifted on the air and hung perfectly still for just a moment, then something wonderful was coming. One April morning, Hana stood beneath her grandmother's great cherry tree and watched a single pale petal detach from its branch. It rose. It turned, and then it stopped. It hung in the air before her, trembling, perfectly still, and Hana held out her palm. The petal drifted down and rested there, and when she looked at it closely, she saw that it was not quite an ordinary petal. It shimmered faintly, the way a soap bubble shimmers, all colours at once and none of them quite naming themselves. She carried it home and placed it in a bowl of water by the window. That night while she slept, the petal unfolded and unfolded further still, until by morning a tiny garden floated in the bowl. Mossy green hills and small silver ponds and a miniature plum tree no bigger than her little finger already blossoming. Hana tended that little garden all summer long, and every evening she would sit and look at it until her eyes grew soft and slow, and sleep came to her the way good sleep always does, quietly, warmly, without a sound. From Japan, our dreamer follows the moonlight south, to the warm golden plains of West Africa, where a grandmother tells her grandchildren a story that has been told for 1,000 years. Chapter 4. Grandmother Tortoise and the Laughing Moon, West Africa. Now there are, in the old stories of the Akan people of West Africa, tales of Anansi, the spider, who gathered all the stories in the world and kept them safe. But this is not quite one of those tales. This is a smaller story, a night story, the kind told by grandmothers in the soft heat of evening, when the fire has died to embers and the children are growing still. There was once a tortoise, old and slow and very, very wise, who lived at the edge of a great savanna. Every night she would emerge from the shade of her acacia tree and look up at the moon. And every night the moon would look back at her. The other animals asked her once, "Why do you stare at the moon so?" And Tortoise pulled her head in thoughtfully, and then extended it again and said, "Because the moon is the oldest storyteller. And if you are patient, truly patient, she will tell you everything she knows." The children listening to this tale would always ask the same question: "What does she know?" And the grandmother would smile and lower her voice and say, "She knows the name of every child who has ever been born beneath her light. She knows every dream you have ever dreamed. And she keeps them all, every last one, safe and sound." And the children, hearing this, would look up through whatever gap in the roof or doorway was nearest and find the moon, and feel, each one of them, that she was looking back. Our dreamer breathes in the warm night air and turns northward in her dream, toward Scandinavia, where the summer sun barely sets, and a boy discovers what lives at the bottom of the oldest lake. Chapter 5: The Lake Boy and the Song Beneath the Water, Norway. Now there was once, in Norway, a boy called Eric, who lived with his father beside a lake so old it had no name. The local people simply called it the oldest lake and left it at that. In midsummer, in that part of the world, the sky never quite goes dark. The sun dips toward the horizon and then changes its mind, leaving the sky a deep, burning amber that seems to last all night. Eric loved this more than anything. One such evening, Eric lay on his stomach at the water's edge, watching the amber light dissolve into the lake, and he heard something. Not the sound of wind, and not quite the sound of water, but something between the two. A low and beautiful humming rising from somewhere very far below the surface. He pressed his ear to the water, just the shell of it, just where the lake's skin met the air, and the sound grew clearer. It was a melody he had never heard, and yet he recognized it immediately, the way you recognize a smell from years before, from somewhere warm and safe, without being able to name the place. His father told him later that it was the song of the Nukken, the water spirit, who had lived in that lake since before there were people to give things names. Not a frightening spirit, not in this story, but one who simply loved music too much to stop, who had been humming down there in the cold and the quiet for 1,000 years. Eric fell asleep that night with the melody still in his head. And they say, those who know, that children who hear it once are never without music in their hearts again. The dreamer smiles and moves on, the path winding now through jasmine and night-blooming flowers toward India, where a little girl learns the secret of why the stars are shaped the way they are. Chapter 6: The Girl Who Counted the Stars, India. Now there was once, in the state of Rajasthan, a girl called Priya, whose one great passion in life was counting things. She counted the tiles on the courtyard floor 412, and one cracked one that she decided counted as half, and she counted the brass vessels on the kitchen shelf, and the steps down to the well, and the pigeons on the temple roof at noon. But the thing she wanted most of all to count was the stars. She tried many times lying on the rooftop on a cot in the warm nights of summer. But the stars, she found, would not be counted. Every time she reached a number she felt sure about, she would find another cluster she had missed, swimming up out of the dark like a school of silver fish. Her grandfather sat with her one night and said, "Do you know, Priya, that each star has a name?" She looked at him with great seriousness and asked, "Who named them?" And he laughed and said, "The first dreamers. The ones who looked up so long and so lovingly at the sky that the sky looked back and decided to introduce itself." After that, Priya stopped trying to count the stars. Instead, she simply lay and let them look at her. And the stars, patient and ancient and impossibly bright, seemed in some way she could not explain to know her. And she fell asleep each night feeling very glad about that. The path curves gently, and our dreamer finds herself standing at the edge of a great forest, and from somewhere deep inside it, she hears the sound of a flute and follows it into an old tale from the heart of China. Chapter 7. The Flute Player of the Jade Mountain, China. Now there was once, long ago in the mountains of southern China, a boy who could play any instrument but loved the flute above all others. His name was Wei, and he was 12 years old, and he lived with his family in a village where the mist came down every evening and wrapped the world in quiet grey silk. Wei played his bamboo flute at the edge of the village each evening as the mist came in. And everyone agreed, even the most serious elders, that his music was the finest they had ever heard. The chickens would come closer. The dogs would sit. Even the river seemed to slow. One evening, an old man appeared at the edge of the mist, a wandering musician, it seemed, with an erhu across his back and stars in his eyes. He listened to Wei play for a long time, and then he said, "Boy, your music calls to the mountain. Can you hear it answering?" Wei listened, and impossibly, he could. A deep, resonant hum coming from somewhere inside the jade-green mountain behind the village, low as a cello, steady as a heartbeat, responding to every note he played. The old man smiled and told him that the mountain had always loved music, that it had been listening quietly since the beginning of things, and that it only replied to those who played with their whole heart, every breath, every note, every silence in between. Wei played until the stars appeared and the mist was thick as wool around him. And the mountain hummed on long after he had stopped, sending its low, warm music through the ground, up through the soles of his feet, all the way to his dreaming heart. Our dreamer crosses wide blue waters in her dream and arrives softly on the wild green coast of Scotland, where a little girl finds a letter that was written especially for her, hidden inside a standing stone. Chapter 8. The Letter in the Standing Stone, Scotland. Now there was once, on the Isle of Lewis in the far north of Scotland, a girl called Morag who had red hair and muddy boots and a great love of very old things. She loved the old stones most of all, the great standing stones that rose from the peat-dark ground at Callanish, grey and solemn and impossibly ancient, arranged in a circle no one had fully explained. She visited them often in the way children visit beloved things, with quietness and attention and no particular purpose. She would press her palms to the rough surface and feel the cold of 1,000 years in the stone and think about all the hands that had pressed there before hers. One autumn afternoon she found a crack in the base of the tallest stone she had not noticed before, a thin dark gap just wide enough to fit a hand inside. And inside, folded into a small and careful square, was a piece of paper. It was very old, but the ink was still dark and clear. And what it said was this: "Well done for finding this. You were always going to find it. The stone has been keeping it for you. Sleep well tonight." Morag stood very still in the grey Atlantic wind. She looked at the letter for a long time. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her coat pocket and walked home across the heather with her muddy boots and her red hair, and a feeling so warm in her chest that she thought the stones must have put it there too. Our dreamer lingers in the north for just a moment more before the path turns again, carrying her south and east into a tale from old Persia, where a boy discovers that even the desert at night can be full of the most extraordinary kindness. Chapter 9: The Desert Boy and the Carpet of Stars, Persia. Now there was once, in the great desert of Persia, a boy called Darius who herded goats with his uncle on the edge of a vast and ancient salt flat. The desert at night was a world entirely different from the desert by day. By day, white glare and heat that shimmered like water. But at night, oh, at night. At night, the salt flat reflected the stars so perfectly that it seemed the world had turned upside down. The sky below you, the stars beneath your feet, and you yourself, floating, suspended, between two great and shining heavens. Darius, who was 7 years old and afraid of very little, would lie on his back and stare upward and think that the stars were holes in a dark cloth, and behind the cloth a great warm light was shining. He told his uncle this, who considered it seriously for a long time. His uncle, who was a quiet, thoughtful man with a gift for the right word at the right moment, said, "You know, in the old stories, the stars were stitched there by the great weavers at the beginning of time. They are the knots in the carpet of heaven, and every knot, the weavers say, is a wish that was made so perfectly, so fully, that it became permanent." Darius looked up at the carpet of heaven spread above and below him, every star a wish shining. He closed his eyes then and made a wish of his own, quietly, carefully, completely, and then lay very still, half expecting to feel himself rise just slightly and join the rest. The dreamer begins to feel the night grow softer still, and the path beneath her feet more familiar. She walks now into a tale from Mexico, where a little girl discovers that the dead are not so very far away, and that they love us just as warmly as they ever did. Chapter 10: Marigolds and Moonlight, Mexico. Now there was once in the old city of Oaxaca a girl called Lucia who loved Dia de los Muertos above all other days in the year. Not because she was morbid, she was not, but because she found it, of all celebrations, the most joyful. She and her mother would spend the days before building the ofrenda together, laying out photographs and marigolds and the sweet smell of copal incense and plates of her grandfather's favorite foods, tamales and chocolate and ripe yellow mangoes. And Lucia believed, with all the confidence of childhood, that he came and ate them. One year she stayed awake past midnight on the 1st of November, curled quietly in the corner of the room where the ofrenda stood. The candles were lit, the marigolds glowed orange gold, and the smoke of the incense rose in slow spirals toward the ceiling. She did not see her grandfather, not exactly. But she felt something, a shift in the air, a warmth that pressed against her like an arm around her shoulders. And she heard, or perhaps only half heard in the space between waking and sleeping, a low, familiar chuckle. She smiled and pulled her blanket up and thought, he came. Of course he came. The marigolds were always for him, their petals a bright road through the dark, and love is a thing that has never, in any country or any century, allowed a little distance to stop it. The moonlit path grows quieter now, and our dreamer walks more slowly, the flowers on either side beginning to close for the night. One last tale awaits her, from the rainforests of Brazil, where a child learns the language of the sleeping river. Chapter 11, The Sleeping River and the Boy Who Listened, Brazil. Now there was once, deep in the Amazon, a boy called Tomás, who lived in a small riverside community where the river was the road and the forest was the garden, and the sky at night was full of sounds that people from cities had never heard and could not name. Tomás had grown up with the river. He knew its moods the way other children know the moods of their own households. He knew when it was restless and when it was pleased, when it ran fast with purpose and when it spread wide and lazy in the afternoon heat. His grandmother, a woman of deep and comfortable silences, had told him once that the river slept. Not all at once and not all of it, but parts of it, the still parts, the backwaters and the quiet oxbow bends, would sometimes fall into a very ancient sleep. And if you were quiet, completely quiet, you could hear it breathing. One evening, Tomás paddled his canoe to a still bend in the river and lay back against the bow and listened. The jungle sang around him, frogs and insects and the occasional low bell of a distant bird. And beneath all of it, slower than anything, he heard it. A long, low, slow exhalation, like the breath of something enormous, at perfect rest. The river breathing, patient as stone, old as light. And Tomás breathed with it, in and out and in and out, until his own breath had found the same slow rhythm, and the stars above the canopy multiplied and multiplied, and the river carried him home without him ever quite knowing he had moved. The last chapter, our dreamer turns back along the path as the moon begins its long, slow descent. Everything she has witnessed tonight settles softly around her like petals, and sleep, deep and sweet, draws very close. Chapter 12, The Path Home. Now our dreamer, the one in the white dress, the one who walked barefoot into this long and luminous night, begins, at last, to turn back along the path. The moon above her has shifted, lower now and softer, its light no longer silver bright, but warm as candlelight, warm as the yellow of old honey. The flowers on either side of the path have closed their petals for the night. The pink roses have folded inward. The golden blooms have drawn their brightness down. Everything is breathing slowly, the way the world breathes when it has decided it is finished for the day and that the day was good. She carries all the tales with her now, gathered like wildflowers in her arms. Fion's fairy road, glimmering in the heather of the west. Hana's tiny floating garden, its plum tree blossoming in a bowl of water. The grandmother's moonlit tortoise, patient on the savannah. Eric's lake, humming its music from somewhere impossibly deep. Priya counting stars that look back at her with perfect recognition. Wei's bamboo flute calling to a mountain that answers with its whole slow heart. Morag's letter in the standing stone, kept safe for 1,000 years. Darius lying between two carpets of stars, making a wish so complete it might become permanent. Lucia's marigold road and the warmth of a hand she knew. Tomas breathing with a sleeping river in the dark heart of the forest. 10 tales, 10 lights along the road, all of them warm, all of them kind, all of them true, in the way that the oldest and the best stories are always true, not because they happened, but because they feel like things that happen to all of us in the part of childhood we carry with us always, folded small and tucked somewhere quiet inside. And now the path before our dreamer grows shorter, and the moon dips lower, and the night air is warm and full of the sweetness of closed flowers and cool grass and all the long, unhurried distance of a summer evening. Let your breathing slow now. Let the warmth of this night settle over you, like a blanket, like the particular softness of air just before sleep. There is nothing you need to hold on to. The tales are all safe, stored in the oldest place, the place dreams live, and they will be there when you come back. They always are. The moon is almost at the horizon now. Its light has turned to gold. The path is ending, not because it has run out, but because you have arrived. You have arrived at the place that was waiting for you all along. Rest now. Rest well. You have walked a long and luminous road tonight through the happiest tales of childhood, and the world is very quiet and very safe and very, very good. Sweet dreams, dear one.